Hey everyone, I'm here today to talk about the new upcoming Solana Learn Pathway that has done in collaboration with both Figment and Solana Labs. And so today we're really going to be talking to all the developers out there. We want to show you, what is Figment Learn? What can you do with Solana on Figment Learn? What is a Solana Learn Pathway? We want to show you how it works, what it looks like for you, what you can do as a developer. And then we want to bring up some folks from the Solana Labs team, go through some Q&A, learn more about Solana, learn more about why you should consider it for your next project. So I want to jump right in. I want to get right into a demo and show you what is Learn, how can you do it with Solana. First, I'll show you a couple slides, and then Guillaume will take over and actually go through a brief demo about what's going on, and then we'll get to all your questions. So if you have questions along the way, use the little Ask a Question section at the bottom. But we want to show, this is really for developers today. We want to show you how you can use this, what you can expect to learn, and then answer all your questions about Solana. So let's get started. I will share my screen. Okay. Here we go. Okay, great. And can you guys give me a thumbs up? Can you see my screen right now? Perfect. All right, here we go. So I want to talk about really two things today. What is Figment Learn? And how is it helpful for developers? And then two, how can you get up to speed with Solana and consider using Solana for your next web app? So when we started Figment Learn, we really wanted to solve two problems, two really big pain points we found for developers who are building in Web3, which is, where are the docs? How can I get standard docs? How can I learn about these different protocols? How can I compare different protocols? I've heard about Solana, I've heard about Ethereum. What are the strengths of each of them? What can they do unique for my project? So this is why we created this website called Figment Learn. And I'll give you a quick demo of it in a minute. But Learn is at learn.figment.io. We'll provide the links in the chat. But it's really a place for developers to go and learn about Web3 development. If you've been a Web2 developer and you launched some apps, maybe social apps or mobile apps, and you want to learn about blockchain, this is a great place for you to come in and learn things. And so we really started from this first pain point, which is, where can I find documentation? How can I compare these protocols? The next thing we did is we said, okay, once we've taught people the basics, allowed them to compare protocols, we actually want to go through interactive tutorials. Okay, how do you launch your first smart contract? What is a smart contract? Let's back up. And so we created these series of tutorials. We call them a pathway. So a pathway takes you from, literally starting from getting your development environment set up all the way through launching a smart contract, interacting with the blockchain. And so that's really what we want to go through today is show you that process and how it works. And so, as I mentioned, this is all at learn.figment.io, and it's a place for you to compare protocols, look up documentation, and complete these tutorials as well. And what we found is that as we taught developers this process and introduced them to all these new blockchains, we found the number one question we heard was, okay, how do I get tokens? How do I actually do this on mainnet? And so this is what we really did next, is we said, okay, if you go through and complete all these pathways and all these tutorials, we actually help you get started. We'll give you sort of a little amount of tokens, around $50 worth of tokens to actually get started, to start deploying your first smart contract if you want to test out staking on mainnet. And so that's really what we want to talk about today, is how can you learn about becoming a developer on Solana, get some, a little bit of tokens to get started, and really start building in Web3. And so that's what we're going to show you today. It's very simple to do. I mentioned the website learn.figment.io. I'll show you that in a second. And then I will also show you this service called Data Hub. One of the things that's sort of a surprise to many developers coming to Web3 is the fact that you need full access to a full node. You need sort of your own copy of the blockchain somewhere. And so Data Hub is a service that provides that for you. So the thing to know is, all this is free. You can do all this today, starting right after we're done here today. If you want to go further and deeper, there's more to do there. But really what I want to talk about today is getting started, and that's what I'll show you now. So the place to start is really here at learn.figment.io. And if you scroll down, you'll see right here is exactly what we're talking about today, the Solana Pathway. As I mentioned, there's a ton of other networks here if you want to compare and contrast and look at the docs. But really, for our purposes today, we're just going to look at the Solana Pathway. So if you click into it, it tells you a bit about it, a bit of an overview, just so you know what you're after and some of the core concepts. But if you want to click Get Started and set up the project, you go through here, and it shows you there's a basic repo, an app you can clone to get started. And Guillaume, in a second, will show you what this looks like. but it will show you a few things you'll need to do to get started. So first, you'll want to go and clone this repo. And the second thing you need is you need an account on DataHub. Good news, it's free. I'll show you what that looks like right now. Here on DataHub, there's you go to DataHub, you click on Solana, and here is your API key. So right now it's blurred out. You can show it or copy it, but you'll need this so you can actually start submitting transactions. And as you go through the project, this is where you'll verify that everything you're doing is actually working. So, as you go through this tutorial and start looking at everything that's happening here, so go back to DataHub and click Start and click Verify to make sure that you're actually doing things as you go. Connect to the DevNet, create a key pair, fund your account, all these things. And so it's sort of like if you've ever done test-driven development, it's sort of like that. You want to get the green check mark as you go, and we'll be verifying they're actually completing the code correctly along the way. So I'm going to actually pause here, and I'm going to hand it over to Guillaume to actually show you what this looks like. So the things we've introduced so far are this website, learn.figment.io. That's where you get started. And DataHub is the place where you go to actually go through and verify your tutorials. But I want to show you really what you'll be doing as a developer and what you'll be learning. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. And Guillaume, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, you can show people what we've built and what they'll actually be doing as a developer.
Cool, absolutely.
All right, I see your screen now.
Can you guys see my screen? Cool.
Yep.
So what Andy showed you was the setup of the project. Once you're done with this, once you've cloned and installed all the NPM dependencies and added the environment variable for the API key of DataHub, you should be able to just simply yarn start and start this like little client-side application we've built. This app is built on top of Create React App, which is like the canonical way of creating like a React app these days. And we've made a few little tweaks. The main thing we've added is obviously we've incorporated this like NPM package, which is Solana Web3 Dev, Web3.js, I think it's called. And this is like the main JavaScript library that we're going to use in this pathway to interact with the DevNet of Solana. There's 3 clusters: mainnet, testnet, devnet. We're mostly going to use devnet. I'm just going to show you guys how the first step would work. All the other steps are sort of like working in the same way. Once you actually run yarn start, you'll see this little app that boots, and it should automatically open it on localhost 3000. Otherwise, just like visit it. If you actually look at the instructions, every step works the same way. It introduces you to like a few key concepts. So in the first step, it's really like the JavaScript SDK that Solana built. And then it gives you a little challenge. Previously, all the other pathways we did were very like heavy on the copy and paste. And we thought that it's really taking away a lot of the learning fun, of the struggle, of the, I'm not sure where to go, reading the docs. This is really what the day-to-day life of a developer is. No matter if you're a Web 2 developer or Web 3 developer, it all starts that way. So what we thought is let's give people a little challenge. So the way it works is that you should see my Visual Studio code, right, Andy?
Yep.
Did you guys see? Okay, cool. I wasn't sure if it was my whole screen.
Yep.
So the way it works is that you'll be on this first step. We will tell you to go to like a file, and some of the code won't be working. We haven't implemented the whole thing. We basically build this whole applications and then removed a few strategic places so that you can actually get your hands dirty and actually learn how to use the Solana SDK. So in this case, we haven't implemented the connection to the SDK. So I'm just going to like sort of write it real quick. You can just create like a connection instance using the URL that we give you, which is the one using the API key. You can then call, I'm actually going to copy and paste so you don't watch me code, which is always like painful when it's live. But for each step, by the way, there is the solution because we don't want any developers to get stuck. So there's the challenge, which give with a bunch of hints, and then there's the solution. We really encourage you not to look at the solution, but here it is for you if you're stuck. Once you actually save, you'll see that this page automatically reloads. We get the hot reload of React, of the Create React app. And then you can just move to the next step automatically. And as soon as you move to the next step, if you actually don't do anything, you'll get an alert that tells you, hey, you got to implement the generate key pair function. So you would just like simply go through the instructions on the second step, learn about account and key pairs, look at the challenge, figure out like, how to use the documentations, and then implement that. And then automatically this page would reload and you'd be able to go to the next step. So yeah, I'm not going to show you all of them because it sort of like defeats the purpose of like you guys actually going through this pathway. But we've really tried to like handhold and give you hints when the time is right and do something really interactive. So I'll stop sharing my screen now. And the last thing I'll say is in terms of, I'm not sure how to stop. It's always, oh, there we go. It's probably here. Close video. The last thing I'll say before I give it back to Andy is I'm a Web 2 developer. Most of the people who are going to go through this are Web 2 developers. What's important to understand is really that on the client side, building like a decentralized application is the same. It's usually a Rails or Vue running in the client. The only difference is that instead of interacting with a server, which is like on the proprietary servers of like a big web corporation, you're actually talking with a public blockchain. And this is really what we want to do. So you're going to build a client, and then the last two steps are going to be about understanding, deploying, and interacting with a smart contract, which is called a program in Solana world. So in the end, if you do this whole loop, you'll basically build the client side, the contract, program, which will be deployed, and then you'll have like a full 360 Web3 experience. And there's like $20 in Sol token for anyone who actually completes it and gets verified. So that sort of gives you a little overview. Yeah, Andy, back to you.
Thanks. Hey, Guillaume, that was great. And so, yeah, if you've joined us in the past and you've seen how we've done pathways, this is a really new approach. And the goal here is that instead of going through and hitting some APIs and being left with a pile of scripts at the end, is you'll actually have something in the browser, something you can really build off of. And so we'll start addressing some of the questions we're receiving. I saw one of them was, hey, look, I want to build a game eventually. And so this would be, if you've never built on Solana before, this would be a great foundation for you, because at the end, you'll have a lot of different things you could build off of, or at least patterns you can use to go and creating your accounts and things like that. And so so really what we tried to do here was create something which is much more interactive, much more almost like if you've done like a capture the flag type thing before, things like that. And so it's new for us. We're really excited about it and really want to hear your feedback. The last thing I'll say before I kind of introduce the team and we sort of go through some of the Q&A is if you get stuck, there's a number of places to get help. So as Guillaume said, we really want to present you with the challenge, and if you get stuck, you can look at the solution. But we also have a really active community of other developers going through this right now. And so there's our community is, I think we linked it up to earlier. It's in our Discord. It's called the Figment Learn Discord. There's thousands of developers in there who've gone through this process, and we'll be going through this process as well. So if you get stuck, if you have anything you want to share, please join that. And actually, in the error messages, some of the error messages include the link to our Discord. So if you get stuck, hopefully right there in the error message, you can click it and kind of just go into it. The last thing I'll say is, we created this, and we really are looking forward to people who want to extend it, fork it, add to it. We also reward people who want to create tutorials. And so, going through this process, I think at the end of it, you'll get $20 worth of Sol. If you go ahead and submit a tutorial to us, it doesn't have to be like this web app. It could be just a standalone text tutorial. We also will award $500 worth of Sol. So if you kind of get the basics and want to extend your knowledge or share what you've learned and do some other things, we're really looking for active people that want to contribute tutorials. We've had people do it for a lot of different protocols. So if you need some suggestions or guidance, we're happy to do that too. Okay, great. That'll conclude.
We actually have a list. We'll actually publish after this a list of suggested tutorials. So if you don't know where to start and a little bit confused and you just want to see like a list of 15, 20, 25 ideas that we and so the Solana team built, we'll provide this. So we'll probably just post a link at the end.
Great. So I wanted to just jump right in and get into the demo, show you guys what you can do. But now I want to get to the Q&A. We've crowdsourced a lot of questions beforehand. Please keep adding them down in the ask a question at the bottom. Make sure to try to get as many as we can. But before we do that, let's take a step back. We got two people from Figment here, of course, myself and Guillaume, who have been talking with you guys. We have two people joining from Solana Labs. We have Chase and Austin. Chase and then Austin, do you guys want to introduce yourselves and what you focus on with Solana?
Sure. So my name's Chase. A lot of you might know me. I've been pretty active and vocal on social media since I started. Basically, I'm the developer relations lead. My goals pretty much quite align with what you guys, exactly what you're doing right now. We want to make the onboarding process for developers as easy as possible. Right now, there's probably a high barrier to entry, and what you guys have created right here is kind of reducing that friction And I think one of the biggest things that you've already touched on is that a lot of people think to get started in Solana, you immediately need to understand Rust and these low-level programming languages, which is not the case. Web 2 developers can come in, build their own wallet, build a DEX, use Serum, do any of these things without touching the Rust portion. Obviously, we have a huge demand for Rust developers in the Solana ecosystem right now. It's actually crazy. But if you want to come in and get your feet wet and really just start experimenting, you could build your own simple DApp using straight up JavaScript. I do want to give a shout out. There's a couple other projects. There's a C# SDK that just got built. There's a Java, there's a Python, and there's a couple others in the pipeline. So almost any Web 2 developer has the ability to kind of dive in like right now with the languages they're familiar with and experience those APIs. And then we're going to convert you to Rust developers. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that, Chase. Austin, would love to hear from you as well.
Hey, I'm Austin. I work on product and marketing here at Solana Labs. One of the main things we've been working on over the last really 6 months is about improving the developer tooling and experience. So, our role working with the foundation here is really to make it easier for people to build and deploy applications. Sometimes it's Web 2 applications. Sometimes, one of the software packages that we have coming soon is from a community member is going to be a Swift SDK. So trying to bring more mobile experiences to the Solana ecosystem besides just the wallet system. But that infrastructure layer tooling that allows people to build great applications on top of that. You've really seen this take off in the DeFi space as well, but with all of these kinds of applications, this goes back to Data Hub as well. You need to be able to talk to nodes, to submit transactions, read data from the blockchain, all that sort of thing. So we're really kind of excited for this and the tutorial system to really kind of expand what's possible and easy in terms of developing on Solana. I will also say that I joined from a competitor to Figment, so I feel like a little bit of a spy sneaking in here today.
Hey, it takes a village. The way we think about it is we have some good ideas. Lots of other people have good ideas. It's so early. Let's just keep building. There's a lot of territory for everyone. So first we got to bring everyone along with us. So that's our mindset.
Yeah, and it's been such a really, I will say the last, we have a hackathon that just wrapped up. So, I think we have an announcement coming soon about winners from that. And, really all of these sorts of applications from like the ability to access nodes easily without worrying about infrastructure. That was, I would say, a large problem a lot of developers were facing 3 months ago. Things like Data Hub really are making this much, much easier every day for developers to not have to worry about the infrastructure systems that they're running on. I think that's kind of a pretty major step in making the Web 2 development experience possible on Web 3 as well.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, thanks, Chase. Thanks, Austin. Really appreciate that intro. It makes a ton of sense. And so we have a number of questions, like I said, that we sort of crowdsourced before. We're accepting questions right now at the bottom of the Q&A. I'll try to get to as many as possible. But I want to kick it off just to make sure it seems like a number of people are already familiar with Solana. If you're not, can one of you guys, can you give us a pitch for Solana developers listening today? What makes Solana special? What should I think about Solana for my next app?
Austin, I'll let you take this, and then I'll just kind of follow up with some additional information.
Yeah, sounds good. So, Solana is a layer 1 proof of stake chain. It's designed for long-term scalability, high transaction throughput, and has, a token economic and validator economic system that keeps transactions cheap relative to whatever the asset price may be. The real idea behind Solana is if you had a concurrent state blockchain, so no sharding associated with it, but it has the ability to scale as hardware increases in power. And this is a pretty different concept. If you look at something like Bitcoin, obviously the security of the network comes from the fact that it gets harder and harder to mine blocks as more people participate and computational power increases. Solana is really built to use that additional power that comes from Moore's law. Just computers get faster and faster every year to increase transaction throughput and not rely on software innovations to deliver that predictable scaling into the future. So one of the main promises of Solana that we've been able to sort of see it deliver just in the 18 months since mainnet beta went live is that it gets faster and it keeps getting faster. we want to build a platform that over the long term is going to stay viable for developers. I think a lot of us have been around long enough to remember when Ethereum was very cheap to use. And this is not a knock on Ethereum, but as the asset price has increased so dramatically, the cost of doing things on the network has increased. The way that Solana has been structured from an economics incentives perspective is even as asset prices increase, you both have transaction scaling, which will allow that cost per transaction to stay very, very low over the life of a developer. So that's really, like, I'd say the main pitch for Solana is you don't have to worry about programming on sharding. You get the speed and the throughput and the block finalization of 400 milliseconds. And really, when you're looking at that, it means you can build Web3 applications that feel to a consumer like a Web2 application. You're not waiting 10 minutes for confirmations. You're not having to deal with sharding, which is if any of you have tried programming on it, it's an adjustment, to say the least. And so you're kind of able to sort of, in our view, hit that nice middle ground. Plus, working in Rust is a joy for those who have made the transition over to it.
Yeah, and I had a feeling Austin was going to go for that angle, so I definitely just kind of wanted to reiterate on the fact that I think there's this kind of weird resistance or just hesitation for Web 2 developers. Like I was a Web 2 developer for 10 years, and to make that transition into blockchain, there's a stigma around it and all these things. This is complex, but really, as a Web 2 developer, you can really just dive right in and start interacting with the blockchain just like you would with your own centralized server API. And so don't be scared. It's really, especially with what you guys created, it's amazing. So just run through that, see how easy it can be to do transactions, set up wallets, and just build on Solana just like you were working with your own native centralized application.
Got it. So that's very helpful. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Chase. I want to also ask Guillaume a similar question. Guillaume is also coming to blockchain just in the last 6 months, and he's looked at a few different ones. For you, going through the process of learning Solana, what were the sort of big aha moments, or what things that sort of stuck out to you as unique things that you learned as you created this pathway? You're on mute, by the way. Yep. All right. Sorry. All right, I'll keep going. He's holding us in suspense. Cool. So I actually have a slightly different question, which is, you seem to be very active in terms of building community. How does your approach to building community sort of differ from other blockchain ecosystems, or sort of what's your overall strategy for building community, developer community?
So I actually came from another project. I was part of the Ken ecosystem. I was developer relations advocacy over there. And one thing that I really learned about building a developer community is paying attention to your developers, speaking with them, having one-off conversations, being available to them, because like if you spend that time to be available to them, it's going to be a lot more sticky of a community. I get messages all the time saying, thank you for always answering our questions. I just went through about 200 DMs this morning between Twitter and Discord. I answered all of the ones that weren't asking when moon. It's just being engaged and answering the questions and just really trying to be there for we have some extremely talented Rust engineers out there that need very heavy technical help. But I'm really focused on getting people to cross that line into Web3 and start building on a blockchain. And I think the more put myself out there, the more I engage, it is really the best part of, or the best way, in my view, to build out that community is just, we're here to help. So don't hesitate to ask questions, and that's really the essence of it. Developer relations, it's called that for a reason. Like, you spend time having a relationship with the developers, and they're going to stick around as long as you help keep them motivated. So
yeah. And I'd say, even to go a little further than that, if you go into our Discord and you go into some of the development channels, like, that is where our engineers work. Right. There is a little bit they do in our own private internal Slack. It's generally around like security bug reports we've gotten or something along those lines. Like, the development is done in the public. You know, it's not like we do a bunch of commits on GitHub in private and then like publish the finished like repo or publish it in a batch update. Like, you can see us working in real time and on the engineering side. That ethos has really like pushed forward into the rest of the community. Like we try and be as transparent as possible when people call us out on something. Like we try to give like complete answers, both on technical questions and then sort of on policy related questions too. So, you know, this is an open source project at the end of the day, right? Like Solana Labs is one ecosystem player. The Solana Foundation is part of it. You know, we are writing a minuscule fraction of the amount of code that's out there now and that is in production environments across the Solana ecosystem. And so that's kind of what community is really all about in this, is like, we as Solana Labs are help building tools. The Solana Foundation is like, has a custodial relationship, and like that's it, right? The long-term vision here is not that this is a blockchain where people in the Solana Foundation are writing most of the code. This is sort of the way I think you keep moving things forward well, is like you trust the community as much as anyone can possibly trust the community, and that's like how software gets developed. You know, we have on-chain governance, like those are just like some of the small pieces to it, but it really is about building as much in public as possible.
I'll echo that with the working in public. I think that's a huge reason for developers to trust a project, a foundation, a blockchain. Like it's such an amazing thing to do. It's really inspiring for a developer also to see real people working, building the pipeline in public. I think that we have the same approach in a way to community, in the sense that right now, we're also sort of very centralized. We answer every message. People come to us. People come to Figment, DM me, DM like all the people who work on Figment, and we answer everything. But the goal is really for us long term to be able to like slowly sort of retract and let the community live, and people like be peers. And instead of all coming to us to build tutorials or coming to us to get rewards for questions, just ask anybody, and without even knowing if that person works for Figment, if that person is an experienced Web3 or Solana Lab developer, it doesn't even matter. That's sort of the vision. Like, and I think from my perspective also, as somebody who's new to that world and that industry, quote unquote, is a lot of projects start a little bit centralized because you have to start that way. And then little by little, they remove those dependencies. They like unpin themselves from their community and start creating something that is very decentralized. So in a way, we are like a symbol of this change we want to see. And so we're trying to do this also in the same way.
And you're really unblocking, enabling, and motivating developers, and just being there to answer. And I think one of the things that I forgot to touch on, and I'll just talk about it briefly so we can move on, was feedback. So I've only been here for about a month and a half. We just completed the hackathon. I sent out a feedback form. We got about 400 responses. I think, as expected, a lot of the feedback was about the lack of tutorials, the lack of walkthroughs and guides, and kind of curation of resources, which is something that I'm heavily focused on right now. And you obviously fit right into that. So I think in the next few months, we're going to really see a space where somebody can jump in and be like, I'm new, I go here. I'm somewhere in the middle, I go here, and then basically just follow along those sort of paths, and everybody has a place to go.
And just to answer the question that Andy asked me earlier when I couldn't mute, I'm sorry. It's, the way you're talking about it, Chase, is actually honestly the same framework we're thinking about it. We actually sort of divide our personas in the same way. Like the new beginner who's confused and really needs a lot of hand holding, somebody who's a little bit more intermediate and is not afraid to look at the source code and spend a few hours figuring out something out, and somebody who's more advanced who actually is seriously looking into using those technologies to build like a business, to build an application. And we really think in that way. And I think that's, maybe to answer now really Andy's question, that's probably why we feel like so strongly about collaborating with you guys, because I think we're very aligned. We're aligned with a lot of other projects, but there's something special, I think, with you guys where we feel very aligned with what you're trying to do, and really bridge that gap, like really. And I mean, I know we use that expression all the time, but really try and bridge that, like have empathy, have perspective, like have the perspective of somebody who's confused and can help other people who are confused. And the last thing I'll say is, on top of the stuff we've built, I've been also very inspired by the stuff you guys have built. I think you have a token swap program, which is also this full stack dApp, which is really amazing. Which I think I actually built the Uniswap, a tutorial for the Uniswap clone, which I think is an incredible app. It's written all in TypeScript. The code is like really, really great. If I think for now, like the Pathway is a very good beginner content. I think the Uniswap clone you've built, this token like swap program, is a much better intermediate/advanced. So if anybody here is a little bit bored with the Pathway, go straight to that one. You'll have a blast. Like there's enough code to spend weeks understanding all the intricacies. So yeah, that's also something great you guys have done.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, thanks for that, Guillaume. So we talked about once people are in your Discord, how they can DM you, Chase. Everyone DM Chase with all your questions. Just kidding. There's community there, but the people have already arrived there. What are you guys doing to sort of attract new developers into Web3? Do you have a specific strategy around Web2 to Web3, or from other blockchains to test out your blockchain? What are you doing to sort of attract developers in that way?
So basically right now is, like I said, I've been here for about a month and a half, and I'm pretty much still in the weeds with kind of constructing and kind of architecting the best way to do this. So full disclosure, like this in the past probably month is when I've really been focusing on this. And I have some really good ideas, but like nothing really to share right now. All of that stuff will be made public probably in the coming months.
Okay. Austin, anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that's really been, I'd say, the most impressive is like we haven't done a lot of recruiting of developers so far. And we still have this like incredibly vibrant development community. The best recruiters for developers are other developers, is just people successfully building applications and then other people seeing that success and sort of getting involved on that. You know, one of the early things I think is worth talking about is Serum. So Serum is a decentralized exchange, but it takes it like one step further because there's a central limit order book that's built fully on chain. So they actually run cranks on this. You know, for central limit order book, for those of you who are not familiar, it's the same order book system that a centralized exchange uses. It's the same thing that the NASDAQ uses. It's a much more advanced system than just a basic AMM or a curve function AMM. But the way they built it, it's super open. So you look at something like Radium, they decided to build an own front end for it that allows like multiple liquidity pools to all tie into that as well. It's a very interconnected ecosystem. And this is partially because Solana encourages the reuse of existing on-chain programs in order to sort of create interconnects between things, as opposed to fully deploying a copy of it every time you want to use that same program. So there's been a lot of just organic developer adoption. It's definitely something that, like, especially as we sort of move from like an emerging protocol into a more established protocol and a more established development environment, you know, the recruitment becomes something that, you know, that's why Chase is here, is in part, is just because we're taking this very seriously in terms of how do we get 1 billion people using crypto? It's through fantastic applications developed by developers that, you know, have a more consumer focused, less DeFi focus too over the long term. We have a really, really strong DeFi development community, and we're looking to replicate that success in other areas too now.
So you hit on one of the questions that someone asked in the Q&A, which I'll click start answering now. Here's a question. Is there a library or marketplace for third-party programs? You mentioned you wanted sort of reuse or people to extend what they're doing. How can people find out what's out there and what they can use?
Yeah. So right now, in our Solana documentation, in terms of libraries, we have 2 sets of programs. We have the native programs. I think probably the most popular one of the native is the system program. That's how you transfer SOL from one account to another. And then we have the Solana program library, and this is for all the token programs. There's a swapping program. There's I believe the staking programs in there. So that is all in the documentation. So I think under the runtime libraries is where the native programs are. But at the top of our docs.solana.com, there is the program library. And you can go there and you can see all of those programs. It's fully open source. Like I said, if you're going to build a DApp using those, you're not really inventing anything new. You're kind of just throwing a front end on something that exists, but at least that gives you an introduction. I think one success story that I had heard was Bonfida saw what Serum had done. Serum's completely open source. And they were like, I don't necessarily like how this thing looks. I'm going to build my own and make it really nice and pretty. They did that. And then once they started building that, they went ahead and started getting curious and then started building their own custom programs. And then like, that's kind of like the path that I see for a lot of Web2 developers is basically what I've said a couple times already, I know, but it's like you get in there, you build with these custom programs that already exist, or these existing programs. And then once you get curious, you poke around, you're like, how is my AP actually talking to this program? And then once you figure that out, you're like, oh, I'm going to go make my own little program. Maybe that program just does something very simple, like you send it in an account and an amount of SOL, and that immediately sends it to another account, whatever it might be. And then now you're in the rabbit hole, and hopefully you're stuck forever.
Very good. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for that question, user ET. I'll just extraterrestrial. Thank you for that. I don't know if that's what it is, but thanks for that question, and thanks for popping in there. But Austin, you also said something. You mentioned DeFi and NFT. Of course, these are sort of floated to the top of mind for a lot of people who are looking at crypto. And it seems like there's, you talked about why doing different DeFi apps on Solana might be a good idea, especially with the strength of Serum and all the open source stuff there. Do you want to touch on any of the other use cases? You either go into NFTs or other things you see coming down the pipe, whether it's DAOs or anything else. Is there anything that you really see that Solana might be well suited for, or things you hope to see more of?
Yeah, certainly. So, I want to touch quickly on Metaplex, which was something that recently launched on Solana. So Metaplex is sort of the best analogy that I kind of used to describe it is like the central exchange versus the decentralized exchange. Metaplex is basically a decentralized NFT exchange and store. So right now, most of the marketplaces rely on a central authority to run them. With Metaplex, every user who spins up a storefront, which is basically just a Web2 front end, that connects into a on-chain program that's run in obviously a fully decentralized way, because it's an on-chain program that actually mints the NFTs. So there's no centralized authority here, unlike an OpenSeas or a Rarible or something along those lines where there's a company running it. So that's kind of a great example of program reusability, where anyone can create a storefront, or, quite frankly, you don't even have to use the front end code that Metaplex created. You could build your own front end code because it's just talking to an on-chain program spec, which is pretty cool. I see Chase just put the guide down there in the chat. It's definitely worth checking out. They've done a really nice job building that up. So that's been really kind of, I'd say, interesting to see. When you talk about what are some of the best uses for something like Solana, in some ways describing what are not good uses for it is sometimes even more helpful. So, if people are looking at sort of the thermodynamic energy security you get from Bitcoin or Ethereum, you're not going to get that matched on something like Solana because the protocol is not built with those sort of same incentives in mind. A good way to think about this is like execution layer versus settlement layer. So, in the fintech space right now, all of the innovations happening on the execution layer, that's Robinhood, that's all these fintech apps, that's Venmo. Settlement is basically the Federal Reserve, right? In a US system here. Solana, its sort of long-term play is very compatible with a world that has Ethereum as its base currency or Bitcoin as its base currency. You're talking about basically wrapped assets being deployable on a chain that allows for super fast transactions at incredibly low costs. That is really what you need in order to be able to build consumer-focused Web3 applications. So, at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is the Web2 experience that everyone knows and loves on Twitter. Well, knows and loves maybe a little bit strong, but knows on Twitter, on Facebook, on any of these sort of centralized Web2 platforms, you can build and replicate that in a Web3 environment. And Audius is a great example of this. Audius is a decentralized streaming platform, sort of a SoundCloud, but decentralized. They're using Solana for all of the play counts tracking, all the analytics, all the likes and follows. It's fast enough you can basically replicate, and cheap enough you can basically replicate Google Analytics with it. And that's pretty rare, right? So it's really anything that requires high transaction throughput and fast transaction throughput at really low cost.
Yeah, I wanted to touch back on the Metaplex stuff really quickly, and I think it's important for everybody to know. So I'm actually working on creating a quick little video to show how to do this. Hopefully, somebody out there wants to do a one-click install for Metaplex. Possibly, I hope hosted service. But essentially, just by cloning that GitHub code and running about three commands and adding like 2 configurations, you can actually get a Metaplex store set up on a domain in about 5 to 10 minutes. And that comes, you're the owner of the store. You can let other people be creators. You can mint NFTs. You can auction NFTs. You can let other creators auction NFTs, and you can actually even split the payouts amongst multiple creators. So and this is all out of the box just by simply running it. And obviously there's some things that could be added. I think it's actually 4 programs instead of just or 4 different programs combined. So that was that. And then one other thing, I've been seeing a lot of buzz about this lately, and who knows how quickly it'll happen, but there's been a lot of talk about somebody trying to do a decentralized social media network on Solana.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see it. I'm not sure like the complexity required, or there's a lot of variables there, but Solana could definitely, if you can scale to the NASDAQ, you can scale to a social media network. So hopefully in the future, we start seeing some prototypes for that because I would love to see it.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. What I want to do now is do a series of questions, and I want to address developers who are sort of different points of familiarity, meaning just starting blockchain, already know blockchain, and sort of already have launched an app. And so, Guillaume, I want to start with you. The top vote right now, for 6 people have asked, how long would it take for a non-blockchain developer to learn the basics and build the simple dApp with Figment Learn? So let's say you're coming and you're going to do the pathway here. You've never done blockchain before. How long do you think it might take them to get through this pathway?
I think it would take a beginner probably maybe between an hour and 2 hours to finish the pathway, if they were like doing it really well, not just copy and pasting solutions, but actually looking through the docs, going on Discord, asking other developers, what's a key pair, what's a transaction, what does that mean, what's a confirmation, etc. It would probably take a few hours. You wouldn't have to write actually any smart contract or program. It would be written for you. That's sort of like another layer that I wouldn't really count for a developer, for like a beginner developer.
And so in this, so let's say it takes 2 hours. What are the key concepts you think they take away, and what would be the next step on the path?
I think the key concept we're trying to really expose in this pathway are a connection with an API, a key pair, which is a super important concept, which is sort of the equivalent of like what accounts, like a user account is to Web 2. That's what a key pair is to Web 3. Let me see what else we have here. A balance, the idea that every account has a balance and anybody can check it, and a transaction. And we do 2 transactions in this pathway. The first one is actually to transfer tokens from one account to another, and the second one is actually to deploy a program or smart contract. And it's actually really interesting to understand that conceptually it's the same thing. And that's something as a Web 2 developer, it's the same thing. I see Austin, it is, I think it's a good sort of first order approximation to consider that if you want to deploy smart contract, or if you want to just transfer any value, you're actually using the same function on the SDK, which is in this case, send and confirm transaction. And that is sort of like a crazy thing to consider. One of them has data, but the other one doesn't, only has like an amount, basically. Go and have a look. It's a little bit trickier than that, but it is the same thing. You're actually deploying data or just sending an execution transaction to the blockchain. So connection, key pair, transfer, and then interacting with this like a deployed smart contract are sort of the 4 or 5 key concepts that you would understand if you actually went through the pathway.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And so that's for someone who's just getting started, learning the basic concepts. Maybe a question for you, Chase. What are the common stumbling parts or the points where people get stuck? Concepts that are hard for people to grasp. What can we tell people about to sort of say, hey, other people have struggled with this before. You might run into this. What are the things you might want to call out as people start learning more about Solana?
Yeah. So still basically spending my time gathering lots of this feedback. But to be honest, I think for now, the number one piece of feedback that we get is developers come in and they go to the website, they read like Solana's fast and cheap and great, and then they go to the documentation. which is highly technical documentation. Any Web 2 developer is probably not going to spend too much time on there. So actually the biggest hurdle is just letting developers know that you don't have to dive in, and Figment, you guys are basically unblocking this massive hurdle that we've seen right now just by offering this to show you going through this using the Web3 and then deploying a simple, like you're really unblocking the biggest blocker there is. It's not like people stumble along the way. It's like they get to the beginning and then they go forward or they don't. And that's pretty much what I've come to find out so far.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And so let's keep going down this path. So someone asked a question, hey, I want to create a game as my first project. And so maybe the thing I want to focus on for this question is not like, how should the game work? What are the different pieces of the puzzle for this person? Do they need to run a server anywhere? Do they need a database somewhere? Is this fully serverless? Like they want to deploy something. What would it actually take? What are the different pieces of the puzzle for a developer here?
Yeah, this is a really good question, because I think when someone asks something like, oh, I want to make a game on, that involves blockchain, the question is always like, where actually is blockchain plugging into your stack in your system? So to take the Metaplex example, everything on Metaplex is Web 2 except the auction and minting and transferring of the NFT. So when you're looking at a game, it's sort of like, do you want the leaderboard to be on the blockchain? Do you want all of the items to be on the blockchain, right, as NFTs? Do you want to create an in-game currency that's actually an SPL token, and that way you can bypass the 30% fee in the Apple Store, right? All of those are different ways you can bring blockchain into, I would say, non-native blockchain experiences. But we don't really create this distinction very well. I think as a development community globally across blockchain is you open up Trust Wallet, 95% of Trust Wallet is not blockchain data. It's just an app that then happens to talk to a bunch of blockchain data. It's an interface for it. So I think that's one of the big things to understand is what are your goals with making something? If you can develop a game now, you can absolutely develop a game that has on-chain components built into it. And we have a few examples of people who have done that. But I'm sure, Chase, you've got some other thoughts on this too.
Yeah, a little bit. I think the first thing if you say I want to build a game, what do I need to run? The first thing I say is are you planning this to be a large game? You can use our public servers, but there is a recommendation. You will get rate limited once you reach a certain point. So if you're trying to turn this into a full large scale project and get tens of thousands of users, you would have, and there's a couple people out there that are doing RPC servers as a service. So that's also something,
including us. Yeah.
So there's and that's one option. The other thing is if somebody has to build a game, it's going to be how do I start this? Right now, it depends on the type of game, because Siri for Cope has already built a web-based game that you can go on there and play, which is pretty awesome. Coming from other languages, with this C# SDK, I want to say that this might actually be an unblock for developing Unity games. I'm not 100% sure on that, but since Unity is C# based, then this might be a really high leverage thing for developers coming to get into gaming.
Got it. Okay, I want to ask one really specific question. I want to move on to the next thing because we don't have much time left and there's a lot of questions. So someone asked in the chat, it looks like Dave White, when should I use a blockchain versus a SQL database? Let's kind of really zero that in to say okay, imagine there's some users table. Where would you recommend that they put their users table? Is that something they would have off-chain or on-chain, or is not enough context to answer that question?
Well, that basically depends on if you're trying to be a full-blown decentralized application. If you are trying to do that, it's 100% possible to store all of your data on-chain. I believe Serum's all Serum's order books, they use I think one important thing, and I'm just going to touch on this because I've been thinking about it a lot lately, is in Solana, everything is an account. Your wallet is an account. Your program is an account. Your arbitrary data, it all lives in an account. And our engineers are probably going to kill me if I say this wrong, but I think the only distinction between them is the metadata. That tells you, is this an executable program or what's the balance of this thing? So once you kind of grasp the concept that everything's an account, I can make this a wallet this could be a program. This can just store arbitrary data or user data or however you want to do that. There is a 10 megabyte limit per account. So you would have to be able to structure this properly to make sure that would actually work. I think over time, the plan would be to increase the size of account storage, but right now it's 10 megabytes. And you also would have to, like, I don't want to get too deep into this, but every account requires some form of rent, and you can be rent exempt if you put enough Sol or LAN ports into that to do that. So it really depends on the cost. Probably a high consideration is the cost, and whether you're trying to be a full decentralized application or kind of just, there's always that in the middle between Web 2 and Web 3.
Got it. Well, yeah. That's really helpful.
I just wanted to add one little bit to this, which is like some of this comes back to like a Genesis blockchain versus a weak subjectivity design blockchain. So with something like Ethereum, you can always run an ETH archival node. You can pull every bit of transaction and state history back to Genesis. Because Solana's a weak subjectivity chain in terms of how it does security, it does not have this sort of like Genesis origin focus in terms of how it tracks stuff across accounts. So if what you want is a database that has like lots and lots of history attached to it, there's a ton of great solutions you can do to like bring that data on chain, and you can actually, but like one of the things for that is like the design principles of Solana is again on execution layer. So if what you want is this like long history transaction by transaction report, like you may have to run your own archival node to pull that the same way you'd have to do it on Ethereum. But like you can't really trust the ledger history to be on every validator within the system if you're not like specifically looking and storing that data yourself, because the chain does not require that for security the same way a proof of work chain does.
Got it. Okay. So we're kind of going on this path of like, learning Solana 101, where are the stumbling blocks, when should you use the database versus a blockchain. Let's go all the way. Let's say this person's now launched their game. It's very successful. It looks like there's a lot of ways to get funding to sort of keep either committing open source code or maybe towards projects. I think I saw the Solana Foundation has a big fund, like measured in hundreds of millions. What are the ways that people can either get grants for open source work or funding for their projects for people who are really looking to scale up? What's available?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a huge number of Solana ecosystem funds nowadays that exist that are all looking to do investment across the network. I think there's about 160 mil of ecosystem funds that exist nowadays. So that's pretty awesome. There are also places like, Radium has an accelerator program now. There's a lot of ecosystem things that exist. Grants within the Solana Foundation, it's definitely an activity that it does. A lot of those grants focus now more on infrastructure layer plays. So if you're building something that other people can build things on top of, or you're building something that increases censorship resistance, like that's where a lot of those foundation grants are headed nowadays. But there's definitely still, Solana has Solana Labs does investments in projects as well. So there's lots of opportunities to get funding in those spaces too.
Perfect. Okay, great. So we're almost out of time. I want to click through a bunch of quick questions, make sure we address them as we go. Someone asks, does the operating system matter? Looks like every developer uses Mac OS. I think the answer is no. You can develop on whatever you want. Maybe some of the examples are Mac OS, but I think that one's an easy no. Linux, Windows, Mac OS should be fine. This is questions about the pathway. Maybe Guillaume, you want to take this one. How heavy is this pathway on Rust? I'm starting to learn Rust. I think the answer is not very heavy, but anything you want to add there?
Yeah, it's mostly JavaScript. The Rust program that we're deploying is the Hello World program that Solana wrote. Again, because it's for beginners and we don't want to overwhelm people with Rust because it is a little bit intimidating. So the only thing you have to do, the only thing we're really teaching you is how to deploy, how to understand it. First of all, we go line by line and sort of, block by of like little logical blocks, and we try and really explain what's happening. The second thing is how to build it, aka compile it, and then how to deploy it. That's all you have to do. If you don't understand Rust, you actually can go through the whole pathway if you want to.
Okay, great. Someone has a question. Maybe I don't know if you know this one, Chase. Any good sources on structuring your project? Meaning, are there other projects you could look at the source code and copy, or anything about structuring your overall project best practices?
Yeah, I would actually probably say if you're a Web2 developer looking on how to structure a project, probably take a look at the Project Serum's GitHub. They have designed this really well, and it's like they have great component structure. That's not gonna. I don't know if that's gonna give you the best like overview of an entire project, but Project Serum is definitely one that I point people to a lot, just because they've been here for a long time and they've had time to kind of refine this along the way.
Got it.
And as far as the client side is concerned, again, like as we like a big thread of the past hour we spent together is how do we like demystify like Web3 for Web2 developers? And again, the truth is, it's the same thing as like structuring a client-side Web2 project. You're going to write like custom hooks. You're going to try and like you're going to test your code the same exact way. You're going to try and reuse component. You're going to be able to use like UI component kits. I posted one in the chat, the Oyster swap that you guys have written. Again, I've mentioned it earlier, but I didn't post the link. This one is amazing. It's much more complex than the Pathway, and you should really look at it to understand how you can. And the Solana JSON that Dave White just posted is also really good. I don't know, Austin and Chase, if you've seen that one. Yeah, it's a developer who wrote like a little client library. It's a really good one. So I'd really recommend those two.
Got it. Okay, let's keep going on the lightning round. Is there something like the graph.com or equivalent for indexing or querying data on Solana?
I think, Austin, you're on mute. You might have a better answer than I do.
Yeah, there's a few things that are in the works. I would say that RPC Pool has some data analytic tools available as well on that. There's no reason that you couldn't get a lot of that stuff from Data Hub, assuming that there is enough, historic records there on the chain, I believe, as well. We are eventually, well, let me just say, we have an ongoing project to move the entire chain history with a certain amount of delay onto Arweave for long-term storage to make it more queryable and accessible by people. Because right now you do have to run like an indexer basically from Genesis to get all this data. So that's something that's in process right now. I don't have a good timeline for when that's going to be done. If anyone feels particularly impassioned to pick up and help us work on this, would love to chat. You can find us on Discord as well. But that would be something we'd be interested in talking about. Again, because it doesn't have the same origin requirements and Genesis requirements, it hasn't been something that's needed as much. But yes, it's a short version.
Great.
It's a long-term goal for us.
Yeah, great. Okay, there's a few more questions. We can't get to them all today, but thanks everyone for adding questions in. I like to close with what I call the magic wand question. And the magic wand question is, I give you a magic wand. You can wave it in anything you want, to either improve Solana or change blockchain, wherever you want. Take it wherever you want. But what are you doing with the magic wand? Chase, do you wanna go first?
Yeah, sure. If I had a magic wand right now, and I'm going to base this purely on this point in time, I would be able to make everybody that was developing or interested in developing on Solana a senior Rust developer.
Okay.
That would be my magic wand, because like I said, the demand is high right now and all these projects are looking, and I think once we are able to get that pull, like the projects in Solana and the ecosystem is going to grow exponentially. People are looking to develop really all kinds of custom protocols, and that's a huge need right now. So yes, I would convert everybody to a senior Rust developer.
All right, I'll work on that magic wand for you. How about you, Austin?
I would love to see us hit 10,000 validators in a year. I think there's about right around 700 validators right now on mainnet. There's probably twice that on testnet. That's sufficient to provide very good security, but it's never enough is the short version. We always want to see more. We want to push the Nakamoto coefficient as low or high, depending on how you count it, as we can possibly get it across the network. And so we've got a few initiatives to this degree, but as far as I'm concerned, decentralization and censorship resistance matters very little until it matters a ton. and that, you know, we want to be the network that's the most prepared for this.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for those two answers. I really appreciate it. So we hope today that we could introduce new Web2 developers to Web3 and give them a place to go get started really with the Solana Pathway. If you get stuck, great news. There's tons of places to help. And if you want to contribute back tutorials, you can even get paid more Solana tokens to do that. If you want to go get funding for open source work, there's room for you there too. So I think the main takeaway is for people at each phase of their learning about Solana, or even in blockchain in general, there's something for you here, and there's a supportive community of people ready to help. And so is one of the big learnings for us is when we started doing Figment Learn, the number one customer thing we said when we talked to developers, we said, why aren't you launching your next project on blockchain? And the response was, I don't know who to ask when I get stuck. And so, I mean, really, that's a lot of what we're doing is there is no sort of established Stack Overflow for what we're trying to do here. And so we're sort of solving it with people right now. And so that's why the big emphasis on community, the big emphasis on tutorials is we need to build this up. So I really appreciate you taking the time, Chase and Guillaume and Austin today. And so if you have feedback on the pathway, if you have anything you want to extend it or correct it, if we have any errors, please reach out. And so thanks everyone for your time, and we will see you guys online.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for creating this. This is absolutely amazing. So I'm excited to get some feedback from all these people that are running through this. I personally haven't, but I plan to do that probably today or tomorrow, and then kind of just see how this goes. But again, thank you so much. And
the last thing I'll say is this is the 6th or 7th pathway that we do. And every time we change something. Every month we release one, every time we change something. This one is a big change. And everything we've done is based on feedback from users and foundations. So whatever, like we've made changes last week based on a few people, like on 2 people from their community saying we should do things like that. And we just make changes right away. So like, I cannot stress how reactive we really strive to be and how much we want to listen to to the community. So if there's anything you want to change, like let us know. We can make it in a few hours. So
awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
I'll see you guys.
Bye guys.